Archangel Michael says, "This moment matters. Stay strong, trust God's timing, and keep moving forward. What's meant for you is already on the way." There comes a sacred moment after healing when the pain is no longer sharp but the heart is unsure how to live again, and this moment is just as important as the storm, because surviving pain is one thing but learning how to receive joy again is another. And many people are healed but afraid to be happy, restored but scared to trust peace, because pain taught them that joy can be taken away, and this is where God moves gently, carefully, lovingly, and he sends Archangel Michael not as a warrior but as a companion, because Michael does not only fight darkness, he walks with those who are learning how to live again. And this part is deeply emotional, because joy after pain feels unfamiliar, laughter after tears feels strange, hope after disappointment feels risky, and many people unconsciously resist joy because they don't want to be hurt again. But God understands this fear, and God never shames his children for being careful with their hearts, because he saw what it cost them to survive. And this is why restoration happens in layers, not all at once. And the enemy's strategy after healing is subtle. He no longer attacks openly, instead he whispers, "Don't get too hopeful, don't expect too much, stay guarded. Joy is dangerous." But these whispers are lies, and Michael's role here is to silence them, because God restores joy slowly, since rushed joy can overwhelm a soul that learned to live without it. And Michael ensures that joy arrives safely, gently, without pressure, because joy is not noise, joy is peace that stays. And there are people watching this who forgot what it feels like to wake up without heaviness, to breathe without anxiety, to smile without guilt. And God sees this and says it's time. And restoration is not returning you to who you were before the pain, it is introducing you to who you are now, stronger, wiser, deeper, and more compassionate, because God does not waste suffering, he transforms it. And Michael stands when purpose begins to awaken again, because purpose often returns quietly as a desire to help, to speak, to create, to serve, to love. And the enemy fears purpose more than pain, since pain isolates but purpose connects. And there are moments when healed people feel empty, not because something is wrong but because something new is being prepared. And emptiness is often the space where God places new assignments, and God restores joy by restoring meaning, because you did not survive for nothing, you did not endure for no reason, you did not heal just to live normally. And there is a reason you understand pain deeply, a reason you notice others' tears quickly, a reason your heart responds to broken people, because healed people become safe places for others. And Michael stands when God begins to trust you with responsibility again, not responsibility to perform but responsibility to influence, to comfort, to protect, to guide, because influence after healing creates impact. And this is why your journey took time. This is why God protected you in silence. This is why healing was slow. And now joy returns differently, not as excitement but as stability, not as emotion but as assurance, because peace becomes your strength, confidence becomes quiet, faith becomes steady. And Michael walks with you as joy returns to guard balance, so that fear does not block joy and excitement does not remove wisdom. And you will laugh again but choose wisely, trust again with boundaries, love again without losing yourself. And this is maturity, this is restoration, this is growth, because God's healing means remembering without pain, loving without fear, hoping without desperation. And Michael reminds the soul you don't have to go back to survive, because peace is now your home, and you are safe to rest, safe to breathe, safe to dream, safe to live. And God restores purpose by revealing that your pain created empathy, your tears created wisdom, your loneliness created depth. And these are not weaknesses, they are tools. And the enemy wanted to destroy you, but God refined you. And Michael stands as you step into new seasons, because new seasons bring new tests, and heaven never releases without covering. And this is why dangers missed you, doors closed, people disappeared, because protection adjusted, not ended. And joy is not betrayal of your past pain, joy is proof that pain did not win. And smiling does not mean you forgot what you survived, it means you overcame it. And living fully honors your endurance, because God delights in seeing his children alive, not just existing. And heaven celebrates every moment you choose life again. And the same God who sent Michael to protect you in the storm now walks with you as you move forward, healed, joyful, whole, and ready for purpose. There is a moment after healing and restored joy when God does something very serious, very deep, and very powerful. And that moment is destiny activation, because healing was never the final goal, healing was preparation. And many people think surviving pain was the purpose, but surviving was only training, because God does not just heal people, he sends them. And this is the stage where Archangel Michael does not walk behind you anymore, he stands beside you, because authority is being released. And Authority attracts resistance, and God never releases authority without protection, and there are people watching this who feel a strange fire inside them lately, a boldness they never had before, a clarity they cannot explain, a seriousness about life, faith and purpose. And this is not coincidence, this is calling, awakening, because when destiny activates, the soul becomes alert and the spirit becomes focused and the enemy becomes nervous, because healed people with purpose are dangerous to darkness. And Michael's role here is to enforce heaven's permission over your life, because destiny is not something you chase, destiny is something God unlocks, and when God unlocks it, no human can block it and no demon can cancel it, and many people don't understand why opposition increases after healing. But opposition increases because influence is near, and hell does not fight people who are going nowhere. And this part is emotional, because many of you prayed only to be okay again, but God decided to make you effective, and effectiveness requires authority, and authority requires discipline, and discipline requires separation. And this is why some relationships faded, some doors closed, and some comforts disappeared, not because God was punishing you, but because destiny requires alignment. And Michael stands when God gives you discernment, because discernment is dangerous in the wrong hands and powerful in healed hearts, and you start seeing clearly now, not judging but understanding, not reacting but choosing, not begging but standing. And this is spiritual authority, because authority is not loud, it is settled. And when you speak now, your words carry weight. When you pray now, heaven responds faster. When you say no, peace follows. And when you say yes, doors open, because alignment creates flow. And many people mistake this confidence for pride, but it is not pride, it is identity settled. And God is trusting you now with spiritual weight, because you survived without becoming bitter, and that qualifies you. And Michael enforces this authority by resisting unseen resistance, blocking unseen attacks, and redirecting unseen traps, because destiny paths are targeted paths. And hear this clearly, the enemy knows your name now, not because you are famous but because you are effective. And effectiveness does not always look public, sometimes it looks private, faithful, consistent, and obedient. And God uses people who don't need applause, because applause can distract authority. And Michael stands guard when God begins to use you as an answer to someone else's prayer, because healed people become instruments, and instruments must stay tuned. And this is why God is calling you deeper into prayer, deeper into truth, deeper into obedience, not to control you but to protect you. And there will be moments when responsibility feels heavy, but that weight is glory weight, not burden weight, because burden crushes but glory strengthens. And destiny activation feels serious, because heaven is serious about impact. And some of you feel this urgency to live right, to speak truth, to walk clean, to stay focused. And this is not fear, this is reverence, awakening. And reverence brings authority, and Michael honors reverence, because heaven moves with those who respect it and understand this. Destiny does not mean perfection, it means submission, and submission creates covering, and covering creates longevity. And God is not interested in using you for a moment, He wants to sustain you for a lifetime. And this is why the process was long, the pain was deep, and the healing was slow, because shallow preparation creates short impact, but deep preparation creates lasting authority. And you will notice now that people listen differently when you speak. Problems shift when you pray, atmospheres change when you enter. And this is not ego, this is assignment, because God marks certain people to shift environments, and Michael enforces that mark. And nothing that is meant to destroy you will succeed, because destiny protected is destiny fulfilled. And if you feel resistance, do not panic, resistance confirms direction. And if you feel pressure, do not retreat, pressure confirms power. And if you feel lonely, do not doubt, loneliness confirms separation, and separation confirms calling. And the same God who healed you, restored you, and filled you now sends you. And Michael stands until the assignment is complete, because heaven does not abandon what it authorizes. And your life is not random, your survival was not luck, your healing was not delayed, and your calling is not optional, because God finishes what He starts. And destiny activated cannot be deactivated when God is involved. There comes a final stage in the spiritual journey where God no longer prepares you, He positions you. And this stage is dangerous for darkness, because positioning means visibility, and visibility means impact, and impact means the enemy loses control. And many people misunderstand this season, because it feels intense, heavy, serious, and powerful at the same time. And this is because heaven is no longer whispering, it is declaring. And when God declares something over a life, hell cannot argue. And this is where Archangel Michael does not just protect, he commands, because command authority is released only when assignment is mature. And many of you watching this feel a spiritual firmness inside you now. You are no longer easily shaken, easily confused. Easily manipulated or easily afraid, and this is not because life became easy but because your spirit became strong, and strength is heaven's final answer to past weakness, and the enemy hates this stage because intimidation stops working, guilt stops working, fear stops working, manipulation stops working, and silence becomes your weapon because authority does not explain itself. Authority stands, and Michael enforces this silence by shutting down voices that once controlled you, voices of self-doubt, voices of condemnation, voices of trauma, voices of people who spoke death over your future. And now you notice something powerful: when attacks come, they don't stay; when negativity enters, it doesn't settle; when problems arise, they resolve faster. And this is not coincidence, this is command-level authority, because God has shifted you from survival to dominion, and dominion is not arrogance, dominion is responsibility under God, and heaven releases dominion only to those who learned obedience in pain and humility and healing. And this part is emotional because you remember the days you begged, cried, waited, and felt invisible, and now heaven responds when you speak, and this is proof that tears were seeds, and patience was training, and obedience was preparation. And Michael stands as commander when God seals your assignment, because sealing means permanence, and what God seals cannot be reversed by people, circumstances, or demons. And sealing also means separation, because sealed people cannot blend in anymore, they stand out without trying. And this is why some environments feel uncomfortable now, some conversations feel empty, some habits feel heavy, because authority rejects what once tolerated. And you are not becoming prideful, you are becoming aligned, and alignment attracts heaven's backing, and Michael enforces this backing by removing obstacles before you even see them, redirecting danger before it reaches you, and ending battles before they start. And many of your victories will be quiet, unseen, and unexplained, because God is fighting for you in ways you will never fully know. And this is where prayer changes, because you no longer beg, you agree; you no longer chase, you receive; you no longer fear, you trust, because authority recognizes God's timing and rests in God's control. And hear this clearly: the enemy cannot curse what God has commanded, and God has commanded your life forward, upward, and effective. And even when opposition appears, it will not succeed, because opposition now serves as confirmation, not threat. And this is the season where God uses your voice, your presence, your testimony, your obedience to break chains in others without effort, because authority flows naturally when it is authentic. And Michael stands guard until destiny is completed, not halfway, not partially, but fully, because heaven finishes what it authors. And you will walk through doors you did not force, speak to people you did not chase, and receive favor you did not manipulate, because command level authority attracts provision and protection automatically. And you will know this season is real when peace stays even in pressure, clarity remains even in chaos, and confidence stands even in uncertainty. And this is not emotional confidence, it is spiritual certainty. And God is saying to you today, the fight is no longer yours to survive, it is mine to enforce. And Michael stands as witness that heaven has taken over, and your life is now under divine command, and nothing formed against you will succeed, because this chapter is sealed, commanded, and protected by God Himself. There is a holy moment that comes after authority has been established, and that moment is divine confirmation, because God does not leave His chosen in uncertainty forever. And this stage is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not rushed, it is settled, final, and irreversible. And many people miss this moment because they expect fireworks, but God speaks with weight, not noise. And when God speaks at this level, the soul recognizes it instantly, because doubt cannot survive where truth stands. And this is where heaven closes the chapter of questioning, closes the chapter of fear, closes the chapter of proving, and opens the chapter of execution and rest. And this is deeply emotional, because this is the moment you realize God never changed His mind about you, even when you doubted, even when you failed, even when you were tired, even when you were silent. And the voice of God does not accuse, it confirms, it does not threaten, it reassures, it does not rush, it establishes. And many of you watching this feel tears rising, not because you are weak, but because recognition has finally arrived, because all you wanted was to know that God saw you, heard you, and chose you intentionally. And this is where Archangel Michael stands as witness, not to fight, not to warn, but to testify that heaven is in agreement with your life. And testimony is powerful because it means the trial is over and the verdict is favor. And when heaven testifies against hell, every accusation collapses, every label breaks, every lie dissolves. And this is the season where God speaks identity, not instruction, because instruction trained you, but identity stabilizes you. And God says, you are mine, you are ready, you are trusted, you are sent. And this sending is not frantic, it is calm. Because rushed people are insecure, but sent people are anchored. And this is where prayer changes again, because now prayer becomes conversation, not crisis response, communion, not emergency. And many of you notice now that you don't panic like before. You don't spiral like before, you don't chase validation like before because God's voice settled you and settlement ends striving, and this is emotional because striving was your normal for so long, fighting for peace, fighting for love, fighting for answers, fighting to survive, and now God says rest does not mean stop, it means trust because rest is the highest form of faith, and Michael remains present not because danger is near but because destiny is active, and active destinies require alignment. And heaven does not abandon alignment, and this is where God begins to use your silence as much as your speech, your presence as much as your action, your obedience as much as your effort, and you realize impact is not about speed, it is about accuracy. And accuracy comes from hearing God clearly, and hearing God clearly comes from a healed, surrendered heart, and this is why your journey included isolation, confusion, waiting, and breaking, because broken pride hears God better than busy ego, and now that God has spoken, clarity replaces anxiety, peace replaces pressure, assurance replaces fear, and you stop asking am I doing the right thing and start saying lead me, and this shift is maturity, and maturity attracts trust, and God trusts those who trust Him. And this is why favor increases now, not flashy favor but sustaining favor, doors that stay open, relationships that stay healthy, strength that stays consistent, and Michael stands as guardian of continuity because starting is easy, finishing requires protection, and God finishes what He starts, and you will notice now that your life feels guided, not forced, directed, not chaotic, intentional, not accidental, and this is because God has taken responsibility for the outcome, and when God takes responsibility, nothing can sabotage the result, and this is the final reassurance for anyone watching who still wonders was it worth it? Yes, it was, every tear, every weight, every loss, every lonely night, because it led you here to clarity, confidence, calling, and communion, and this is not the end, it is the beginning, done correctly, done covered, done with heaven's approval, and when God approves no demon can object, and when heaven agrees earth must align, and when God speaks your future listens and moves, and Michael stands until the mission is complete because heaven does not release without finishing, and you are not late, you are not forgotten, you are not behind, you are aligned, authorized, and confirmed, and the next steps will unfold naturally because God already spoke, and when God speaks the future obeys. After God has spoken and heaven has confirmed, there comes a sacred transition that most people never understand, and that transition is daily walking, not dramatic moments, because destiny is not proven in one encounter, it is established in consistent obedience, and this is where God shifts you from event faith to lifestyle faith, and this season feels quieter but it is heavier because responsibility replaces excitement and consistency replaces emotion, and many people confuse quiet with absence, but quiet is where authority matures, and this is where Archangel Michael no longer appears as a warrior in battle but as a commander in formation, because battles are not always fought, they are often prevented, and prevention is higher authority than reaction, and this is where God begins to train your thinking, because authority that is not renewed daily becomes pride or fear, and God does not want either, He wants alignment, and alignment begins in the mind, and you will notice now that your thoughts are challenged more than your circumstances, because if the enemy can influence your thinking, he can delay your movement, and this is why God is teaching you to respond, not react, to observe, not assume. God begins to trust you with influence, not spotlight, impact, not applause, and responsibility, not excitement, because excitement fades but responsibility builds legacy, and this is why temptations now look different, they are subtler, quieter, disguised as distractions, comfort, and compromise, because the enemy knows you cannot be stopped by fear anymore, so he tries to slow you with ease, but Michael guards your focus by making rest holy, not lazy, peace intentional, not passive, and joy discipline, not emotional, and this is where daily prayer becomes alignment, not rescue, because you are not drowning anymore, you are navigating, and navigation requires awareness, and awareness requires humility, and humility keeps authority clean, and this is where God teaches you to speak less but with weight, to move slower but with accuracy, to listen more but with clarity, and this rhythm creates stability, and stability creates endurance, and endurance finishes assignments, and hear this clearly, victory living does not mean problem-free, it means pressure-resistant, and you will face challenges but they will not shake your core, because your core is anchored in God, not outcomes, and this is why God allowed you to lose control earlier so you could learn trust now. Because trust carries authority, and authority carries peace, and peace is heaven's signature, and Michael stands not to fight every day but to ensure order, alignment, and continuity, because heaven values order, and your life is entering an ordered season where chaos cannot dominate, emotions cannot control, and fear cannot lead, and this daily authority walk will not always feel powerful but it will always be productive, and productivity in heaven is measured by obedience, not noise, and this is The final instruction God gives in this stage: walk steady, stay submitted, stay grateful, and stay clean, because what God established He intends to sustain, and you are not required to prove anything anymore. You are required to remain faithful, and faithfulness is victory lived out daily, and heaven honors daily faith more than momentary fire. And Michael remains until the mission ends, because destiny is not a sprint, it is a stewardship, and God stewards what He trusts, and He trusts you. There is a moment in every divinely guided life when God stops focusing only on what He will do for you and begins revealing what He will do through you, and this shift is wholly weighty and deeply humbling, because legacy is heavier than blessing and influence is more demanding than survival, and many people want deliverance but few are willing to carry responsibility, and this is where God tests not your passion but your consistency, not your emotions but your discipline, not your faith in crisis but your faith in calm. And this season feels different because urgency disappears and intention takes its place, and you realize that everything God taught you earlier was not just to heal you but to prepare you as a living reference of His faithfulness. And this is where Archangel Michael is not positioned as a personal protector only but as a guardian of assignment, because generational impact attracts generational opposition, and heaven never releases influence without reinforcement. And this is emotional because now your decisions affect others, your obedience creates safety for others, and your alignment becomes shelter for others, just as Noah's obedience protected generations yet unborn. And you begin to understand that your journey was never selfish, it was strategic, and God allowed you to walk alone so you could lead many later. And this realization humbles the soul because you remember how broken you once were, and now God trusts you to carry others through storms. And legacy does not begin with crowds, it begins with character, and character is formed in secrecy, consistency, and surrender. And this is where God polishes your inner life even more carefully, because influence magnifies both strength and weakness, and God refines what He plans to multiply. And this refinement feels quiet but intense, because small compromises now feel heavy, small disobedience now feels loud, small distractions now feel dangerous, because alignment must remain pure for legacy to flow clean. And Michael stands as enforcer of boundaries, removing people, situations, and habits that could contaminate the future God intends to release through you. And this removal is not punishment, it is preservation, and preservation is love at an advanced level. And this is where your prayer life becomes intercessory, because you stop praying only for yourself and start standing for others, families, cities, generations. And your tears return, but they are different. They are not born from pain, they are born from burden, and burden is a sign of calling, and God trusts burdens only to those who have been healed enough not to break under them. And this is where spiritual discipline becomes natural, not forced, because discipline is no longer about rules, it is about respect for what God has entrusted to you, and respect produces excellence, and excellence protects legacy. And you will notice now that your choices feel heavier, your words feel weightier, and your silence feels strategic, because every action now echoes beyond you. And this awareness does not produce fear, it produces reverence, and reverence keeps authority humble, and humility keeps heaven close. And this is the stage where God begins to reveal glimpses of the future, not to excite you but to steady you, because seeing ahead requires staying grounded. And Michael remains stationed not just around you but around what comes from you, your words, your work, your witness, your seed, and your spiritual lineage. And hear this clearly: legacy does not mean fame, it means faithfulness remembered, influence sustained, obedience reproduced. And God is not in a hurry, because legacy is not built in seasons, it is built in lifetimes. And your obedience today is shaping protection, favor, and clarity for people you may never meet. And this is the sacred truth of this stage: you are no longer walking for applause, you are walking for alignment, and alignment carries heaven's endorsement. And when heaven endorses a life, generations benefit, and the storms you survived become testimonies others will lean on, and the faith you fought for becomes foundation others will stand on. And this is why God did not let you quit earlier, because quitting would have robbed the future, and heaven does not abandon futures, it authors them. And Michael stands as guardian until the last assignment is completed, because legacy must finish well, not just start strong. And you will finish strong because God is involved from beginning to end. There comes a sacred moment that few ever reach, and this moment is not about preparation anymore, it is about release, because preparation shapes you but commissioning sends you. And this stage feels solemn, powerful, and deeply emotional, because heaven is no longer training you, heaven is trusting you, and trust from God is the highest honor a human life can carry. And this is not announced with noise, crowds, or applause, it is confirmed in the spirit, where God marks you internally, and that mark Changes how the world responds to you even when they do not understand why, and this is where Archangel Michael stands in full authority, not as a guardian in waiting but as a witness of heaven's seal, because commissioning is legal in the spiritual realm and nothing legal in heaven can be undone by hell, and this is where your life shifts permanently because God no longer relates to you only as a student or servant but as a steward of assignment, and stewardship requires clarity, courage, and submission, and you now carry all three, and this realization brings tears because you remember how unsure you once were, how broken, how confused, how afraid, and now God places weight on your shoulders not to crush you but because He knows you can carry it, and this weight is purpose, and purpose is heavier than pain but lighter than regret, and God spares you regret by giving you calling, and this is where fear tries one last time to whisper, "Who do you think you are?" but heaven answers immediately, "You are the one God chose," and Michael silences every remaining accusation because commissioning silences opposition, and this is where spiritual authority becomes evident, not because you demand it but because you walk in alignment, and alignment attracts recognition from both heaven and earth, and you will notice now that resistance decreases even when challenges arise because the enemy recognizes seals and avoids battles already decided, and this is not arrogance, this is order, and heaven operates by order, and God places you in position not to strive but to serve, and service at this level looks like leadership, influence, sacrifice, and consistency, and this is where your private life becomes even more important than your public life because what God released publicly must be protected privately, and Michael enforces this by guarding your integrity because integrity is the container of authority, and authority leaks where integrity cracks, and this is why God keeps your heart tender even while making your spirit strong, because hardness repels heaven but humility attracts it, and you have learned humility through pain, patience, and obedience, and now God trusts you with clarity, vision, and endurance, and this commissioning does not mean ease, it means effectiveness. It does not remove opposition, it removes confusion, and clarity is power, and power used correctly builds, not destroys, heals, not harms, guides, not controls, and God is pleased because you no longer want power for self, you want impact for others, and this desire aligns you fully with heaven's heart, and when alignment is complete, release follows, and you are released not just to do something but to be someone, a voice, a light, a stabilizer, a reference point, and this is why people will feel peace around you without knowing why, because peace follows authority rooted in God, and Michael remains present not because you. After commissioning comes continuation, and continuation is where most people struggle because it is easier to rise in a moment than to remain faithful every day, and God knows this, which is why He does not send you out without rhythm, because fire without structure burns out, and structure without fire dries up, and heaven teaches you balance, and this season feels real, grounded, and demanding because now your faith must operate in ordinary days, not just sacred moments, and this is where true leadership is revealed, because leadership is not about how high you rise but how well you carry purpose into daily life, and this is deeply emotional because you realize that the mission does not pause for moods, fatigue, or distractions, and yet God does not demand perfection, He demands consistency, and consistency is sustained obedience over time, and this is where Archangel Michael shifts posture again, not standing in front of you but beside you, because the walk is long and companionship matters, and heaven does not abandon its sent ones, and this daily mission living requires wisdom more than intensity because wisdom preserves energy and directs strength, and God teaches you to choose battles carefully, to rest intentionally, and to listen more than you speak because every word now carries influence, and influence must be stewarded gently, and this is where temptation returns not as obvious sin but as imbalance, overwork, isolation, pride, or neglect of rest and relationships, and God warns you quietly through peace, loss, not punishment, and this is where maturity shows because you respond to gentle correction, not crisis, and Michael reinforces this by guarding your pace because pace determines longevity, and heaven values finish lines more than starting points, and you are being trained to finish strong, not fast, and this training is subtle but powerful because God is building a life that can last, not a moment that impresses, and you will notice now that your victories look quieter but your impact looks deeper because depth transforms more than display, and this is where joy returns differently. It is steadier, calmer, rooted, not reactive, because your joy is no longer tied to results but to obedience, and obedience keeps joy intact even when outcomes fluctuate, and this daily mission requires surrender every morning because yesterday's anointing does not replace today's alignment, and alignment must be renewed constantly through prayer, reflection, and humility, and this is where your private moments with God become your greatest strength, because what you carry publicly is fueled privately, and Michael remains alert not to fight your battles but to keep you from drifting, because drift is the enemy of destiny, and small compromises over time can weaken even strong callings, but you are alert now, aware, disciplined, and willing to correct course quickly, and this keeps you safe, effective, and clear, and God is pleased because you are no longer chasing spiritual highs, you are honoring spiritual health, and health sustains calling, and this is the deeper wisdom of this stage. Mission is not something you do, it is someone you become, and becoming requires patience, endurance, and faithfulness, and God rewards faithfulness with trust, and trust with increased responsibility, and increased responsibility with deeper impact. And as you walk this daily path, remember this truth: heaven does not expect you to be everywhere, it expects you to be obedient where you are, and obedience in one place releases authority in many places, and this is why your steps matter, your tone matters, your presence matters, because you carry heaven into ordinary spaces, and ordinary spaces become sacred when heaven walks in. And Michael walks with you, not ahead, not behind, but beside, because this mission is no longer about arrival, it is about journey, and the journey is where God is most present, and as long as you walk submitted, steady, and sincere, you will not lose the fire. You will learn to carry it safely, faithfully, and powerfully until the end. There is a sacred truth few people talk about, and that truth is this: starting with God is powerful, but finishing with God is rare, and this is why heaven gives special attention to the final stretch of a calling, because endings determine remembrance. And God is not only the author of faith, He is the finisher, and this season is not about speed, achievement, or recognition, it is about endurance, purity, and faithfulness until the very end, and this stage feels quieter, slower, and more reflective, because God is removing urgency and replacing it with assurance, and assurance is the sign of maturity, and this is where Archangel Michael stands in full stillness, not drawing a sword, not blocking attacks, but standing watch, because the greatest danger now is not attack, it is exhaustion, discouragement, or subtle compromise, and heaven protects finishers fiercely, and this stage carries deep emotion, because you look back and see how far God has brought you through pain, betrayal, waiting, loss, obedience, and unseen sacrifices, and tears come not from fear but from gratitude, because you know without God you would not be here, and humility deepens because you understand now that strength came from surrender and victory came from obedience, and God honors this by giving you peace, not explanation, because peace is greater than answers, and this is where your faith becomes unshakable, not because nothing shakes you but because nothing moves you out of alignment, and storms may still pass but they no longer define direction, and direction is fixed because destiny has been clarified and sealed, and this finishing season requires guarding the heart carefully, because bitterness, regret, or comparison can weaken even strong runners near the end, and God gently reminds you that your race was never meant to look like others, it was meant to be faithful, and faithfulness is the measurement heaven uses, and Michael guards your heart from distractions that could steal joy, because joy strengthens endurance, and endurance completes purpose, and this is where your voice carries wisdom, not urgency, because wisdom comes from having walked through fire and survived with love intact, and people listen differently now, not because you demand attention but because peace draws respect, and this is the fruit of long obedience, and God teaches you to rest without guilt, to reflect without regret, and to trust without fear, because the outcome is no longer uncertain. Heaven already knows how this ends, and it ends well. And this is the emotional beauty of this stage: you no longer need to prove anything, defend anything, or rush anything, because God Himself is your witness, and heaven records faithfulness even when earth forgets, and this is where eternal perspective becomes real, because you understand that legacy is not only what you leave behind on earth but what you carry forward into eternity, and God prepares you gently by loosening attachment to outcomes, applause, and validation, and replacing them with contentment, gratitude, and quiet joy, and Michael remains present as guardian of peace, ensuring that nothing disturbs the finish God has planned, and this is where you realize that the greatest victory was not influence, miracles, or impact, but staying true, staying surrendered, and staying aligned until the end, and this is why heaven celebrates finishers, because finishers reflect God's own nature, faithful, consistent, and eternal, and as you step into this final stretch, know this clearly: God is not watching to see if you fail, He is walking with you to ensure you finish well, and nothing can cancel what obedience has completed, and nothing can erase what faithfulness has sealed, and you will finish strong, not because you are perfect but because God is faithful, and He finishes what He starts.